Well, good afternoon or good morning, everybody, depending on where you're joining us from today. It is 3 p.m. here in the UK and it is 10 a.m. Eastern time. And you're all most welcome to join us here at 0 Days Live. Hello there, everybody. Welcome to Monday. I hope you had a very pleasant weekend. And as you may be aware, this week is our penultimate week at 0 Days Live. How the time has flown by. Today is in fact show number 33 of the 40 episodes that we're bringing to you in our first season of 0 Days Live. And today, in a few moments, we'll be welcoming Joseph Brunsman from CPL Brokers. But before we do that, also on our penultimate week this week at 0 Days Live, we're going to also invite very special guest Rick Turner onto the show, who's going to give us a glimpse into his recent research on zero trust access. And how it's become more relevant than ever in our new remote world. And of course, From Friday is back again this week, where this week we will be celebrating National Solitaire Day. So stay tuned for what we've got planned on that day too. Hello, everybody. Hope you are well. I'm Stuart Reed and I'm with Nominet, focused on cyber solutions. And then, as usual, I'm going to be in the chair to welcome our special guests each and every day of our live shows. Just a quick reminder, of course, that Nominet is primarily known for being responsible for managing the .uk domain, which we've been doing so for over 23 years now and have something in the order of 15 million domains under management. Building on this strong heritage of understanding the importance of domain names for network connectivity, we also provide cybersecurity solutions to protect both government and enterprise networks worldwide from cyber attacks, including providing service to the UK government's National Cyber Security Centre. Ensuring people are able to be connected, included and secure is at the heart of what we do at Nominet, and that is perhaps more important now than it ever has been before. And with that in mind, we wanted to bring you an interactive show to bridge the gap that's been left behind by the lack of physical meetings that are taking place right now and bring you 0 Days Live. And this is a platform really for everybody with an interest in or from within the cybersecurity community. I am, of course, joined both front of house and behind the scenes here with a highly capable team, making sure everything runs just the way it should, albeit remotely. And I do want to make a special mention again this week to those that do help out behind the scenes. Of course, you're familiar with Kerry and Steve for all our regular viewers that join us front of house. But behind the scenes, we've got Jason, we've got Lucy, Lizzie and Lindsay. And whilst you don't see them on the show, they are here each and every day to do an excellent job for us in making sure that we are up, running and live and everything's running just the way it should. Now, as with every week that we've been running live, we do have a burning question. This week, the new burning question for us is, what lessons have you learned in lockdown? So do please let us know by simply typing into the console on the right-hand side of your screen. Now, for me, I've given some thought to this, and I think that the thing for me that I've really learned is that technology is here now able to be far more flexible and far more useful in terms of creating a flexible approach to work. And whilst I really do miss face-to-face contact and the office banter, it has shown me that actually you can achieve a lot remotely. And to Kerry's point last week, you don't always need to be face-to-face for relatively short meetings. And perhaps there's an application or an opportunity for us to reduce our carbon footprint, which is, of course, something that has been quite topical for a number of months, if not years now. Steve, what lessons have you learned in lockdown?
I think the main thing I've learned is how much of a beautiful country we've got here, and there are plenty of things on the doorstep that before, and go for walks or cycle rides. So I think I've learned that there's far more there on your doorstep for you to do than you probably ever knew.
Yeah, I think that's actually really good, because I found myself taking strolls around my local area as part of my permitted exercise, and I've discovered lots of places that I didn't really know existed. So it's actually given me an opportunity to explore a bit more as well. So I think that's a really good one. And Steve, just out of interest, can you believe this week is our penultimate week?
I can't believe it. I mean, it's gone so quickly, and I'm sure the next few episodes are going to go just as quickly, but it's been great fun so far, and I'm really looking forward to the final couple of weeks.
I know, me too. It has gone really, really quickly. But if I reflect, we've met a huge amount of very exciting guests on this show. I feel that I've learned a lot from it, and I do hope that everyone tuning in has as well. As we conclude our 40 live episodes at the end of next week, it will be now. So yeah, thank you for that, Steve. And to everybody tuning in, please do let us know what lessons you've learned in lockdown as well, and we'll read them out. So simply type them into the questions console into your screen and let us know. Now, as I mentioned a few moments ago, this show really isn't the same without all of you tuning in each and every day to join us on 0 Days Live. We are very pleased to welcome regulars to the show and also new audience members each and every day as we start to build out an accessible community to bring people together, hear from others in the industry, get a roundup of what's going on in the news, share some thoughts on best practice, of course, and interject a little bit of good humour along the way. And with that in mind, whilst we do cover a lot of important subjects here, and we've covered a huge amount over the last few weeks that we've been running the whole series of 0 Days Live, as you'll appreciate, we don't take ourselves too seriously. And as a quick reminder, for each of our 30-minute or so shows, we are absolutely live for each and every one of those shows each day that we're running. So as such, there has been, for our regular viewers who will have witnessed it, and there are bound to be a few more blips along the way before we conclude our series of 0 Days Live. But if and when they do happen, we do hope you agree that it's just a part of the reason you tune in, and you'll look back on it with some fond memories. Also remember that whilst we are live each and every day, we are also here for your convenience too on demand. So please do check us out at nominetcyber.com/0 Days Live. And of course, as you have been already, please do continue to get involved. If during today's show or any of the other live shows that you join, you want to ask a question, give us a comment, please do so using the console on your screen, and Kerry will read them out during today's webcast. And speaking of Kerry, how are you today?
I'm really good, thank you, Stuart. How are you?
Yeah, doing very well. It's a nice, pleasant day in the UK today, so it feels quite summery, quite upbeat. How about yourself?
Yeah, similar. Lots going on around here, so lots of people out and about.
Jolly good. So, what lessons have you learned in lockdown, Kerry?
Well, I was going to say the importance of your neighbours, but as at the moment I can hear one of them mowing really loudly over there and constructing a trampoline behind me here. I'm tempted to change my mind, but yeah, I think for me it is that like I've said a few times on the show, I've only been in my house for a short period of time, and I don't really know the neighbours that well. So it's actually been a really great experience over the last couple of months, certainly on a Thursday night when we all go out and clap for the NHS and just getting to know people in the street. Otherwise, I could see that it could have been a very lonely couple of months for people who are on their own.
Yeah, I am starting to see actually, and this comes back to some of the points we made last week, that the people are really starting to come together, albeit remotely right now, but it does feel that everyone's looking out for each other, which is a nice thing. And to the point last week, I do hope that continues outside of lockdown as well. So thank you very much for that, Kerry. Now, everybody, as I mentioned a few moments ago, this is usually the point of the show where I'd welcome today's very special guest to our virtual studios. Now, as we come towards the conclusion of our 0 Days Live, it had to happen at some point, and we're probably quite lucky it's not happened until now. But sadly, we are unable to speak to today's special guest, Joseph, due to some technical challenges that have been encountered. So unfortunately, we're not able to talk to him directly around some of the cyber insurance pieces that we were looking forward to exploring in a little more detail. But because we are a live show and because we don't want to be letting down our regular and our new viewers, I have decided without prior discussion to invite Kerry and Steve back onto screen so we can have our own little discussion instead. Where are you both?
Hi.
Hey, I've been waiting 33 episodes for this.
Exactly. As I say, we're probably really fortunate that we haven't had such technical challenges before now. So it was bound to happen. It was a bit of a numbers game for us. Unfortunately, it has happened today. If we're able to, we will certainly bring Joseph back onto the show so that we can talk about it in more detail. Clearly, cyber insurance was the subject of today, and I guess that the overall subject of cyber insurance is that it's relatively new. It's something that hasn't been around for perhaps as long as other insurance policies, and there's perhaps still a little bit of misunderstanding or confusion in the market about what cyber insurance policies really are all about. Steve, from your perspective, what's your kind of feeling on actually what a cyber insurance policy is all about?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it's relatively new, hasn't been around for very long, and the offerings from cyber insurance companies is changing rapidly as well. Initially, it was around the kind of the real cost of a data breach, but also building in factors like the cost of having professional servicing to perhaps rebuild networks or whatever it might be. And as time has gone on, it's starting to incorporate more and more in terms of things like protection against data breaches from perhaps a civil lawsuit or something like that. And many more of these insurance companies are now looking at diversifying in terms of what they offer around cyber insurance and how that can help clients.
Yeah, and Kerry, from your perspective, I know that you've done some research in the past around kind of the cyber insurance market and the approaches there. What do you feel that kind of the general perception is of cyber insurance out there in the market now?
I mean, certainly, I was lucky enough a couple of years ago to be involved in a market research project where we actually went out and interviewed a lot of different organisations on their views on cyber insurance as it was then. I think from what we saw, there was a lot of appetite, particularly within the senior leadership team within the organisations and the board level, to have that kind of financial insurance around cyber threat and looking at the impact of threats that are caused. But having a little bit of nervousness, I think, more on the kind of CISO, on the security team side, because how can you then build an insurance policy unless you've got that linked to your risk posture? And then how do you then rate your risk posture to be able to impact on that policy to give you the best kind of premium there? So I think the way that we were looking at things years ago was there was a lot of appetite and it was something that boards were demanding, but actually the tools and the insurance companies weren't actually in place and set up to be able to deliver them properly. Now, obviously, that was a couple of years ago, so it's not gone away. And obviously, people are innovating and adapting to be able to kind of come up with solutions that satisfy that kind of appetite at board and CFO level, I guess.
Yeah, and I think actually it raises an interesting point because, as I mentioned, cyber insurance policies are still relatively in their infancy compared to some other insurance policies that are perhaps more established, and it's trying to work out how to quantify something that's not necessarily a complete tangible risk profile. It's not like you're insuring a physical asset that if that gets lost, you get a replacement for it. This is something that's far wider and broader than that. And there does seem to be this slight misconception that, or at least in the early stages, in some areas, there's a misconception that having a cyber insurance policy was perhaps a replacement for good cyber hygiene, which Steve, of course, you'll know that is not the case from cyber insurance policies. They're not there to prevent or to replace a good approach to cyber policy or cyber risk or good diligence as far as an organisation is concerned, are they?
No, absolutely. And, many of these insurance companies are going to charge you a premium based on your current security posture. They're going to be asking questions around the certifications you've got, the technical implementations you've got in place that are protecting your organization. So the less you do in that area, the more it's going to cost you for cyber insurance. And then it doesn't really kind of equate to good value for money, because actually investing in some of those things up front is going to reduce your premiums. There are many things that insurance can cover you against, but there are many things it's not going to cover you against as well. There are some specific terms within the cyber insurance policies around the things you must have in place, the things you must do to protect yourself, but also some specific areas that they will not pay out on if you haven't done certain things, just as you'd expect with any insurance. And then some things from a legal perspective that they're not allowed to insure. So many of the data protection regulation aspects within it, insurance companies just simply will not insure you against, because one, the risk is too high if you haven't done the right things, and secondly, potentially there's some legal elements of it as well that and then you've got to consider the reputational risk as well. Whilst you might be able to insure yourself against some of the kind of financial things within there, some of the reputational risks are much more longer term than the immediate payout that the insurance company is going to give you.
Yeah, and I think actually that raises another interesting point, because for at least at the beginning, there were some high-profile cases that went to court from organisations that had taken out insurance policies and were trying to claim against them. And I think, again, perhaps these test cases help to reaffirm where the boundaries of some of these things are. I mean, it is very similar to, if you're insuring your car, you still need to be diligent around taking care of that car. You wouldn't leave your keys in the ignition and just hope for the best because you've got it insured anyway. Many insurance policies will probably be void on the basis of you leaving keys in the ignition, somebody driving it away. And it seems to be, some of those early test cases at least seem to also reaffirm that this is, again, it's not about taking away all of that risk from an organization, and therefore they don't need to do anything about good cyber hygiene or good cyber practices. It's there to help quantify some very specific things on the basis that you've done all the diligence in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone kind of accepts now that cyber attacks and data breaches, it's kind of generally accepted that it's a when rather than an if scenario, and that's what insurance is there for. It's for that when it does happen and when you've put all those other things in place. And again, everyone accepts that there is no 100% silver bullet for protecting yourself against cyber attacks. It's important to have those layers of security, but inevitably, if someone really wants to get into your organization, they're probably going to find a way of doing it sooner or later. So insurance is there to kind of, for those, that 5% in the technical or the procedural coverage. And
echo Steve's point there as well, because obviously we're talking on the show quite a lot about the proportion of threats that come in through supply chain. And so, you can do your best due diligence within your own organization, but then you still have to have a supply chain that you work with. So giving that extra layer of protection for you as that organization financially.
Yeah, and also I'd be interested to know, actually, of our viewers tuning in today, how many of those have actually got an active cyber insurance policy as well. So do please let us know, and Kerry, if anything comes through, do let us know on that as well. But I think, yeah, these are points all well made in terms of understanding, the spirit and also the confines of cyber insurance policies and what they're really there to protect. And I guess the other thing to note is that we talk a lot about legislation and standards as well, and whilst there is kind of a base minimum that everyone should be striving for, and in some cases legally have to strive for, that minimum often is just the minimum benchmark. Ideally, organisations should be looking to go over and above that, and it comes back to some of the points you made earlier, Steve, around the reputational piece, which is very difficult to insure for, because once your reputation's been damaged, it's very difficult for you to kind of cover that, and certainly quantifying the impact on that reputational damage from a cyber insurance perspective is probably really hard to do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think of things, those security things that you can put in place, and those certifications, and the things we might have to meet from a regulatory perspective, almost all of those will put a certain, like say, baseline security in place. But as we've seen in the news and some of the discussions we've had over the past couple of weeks, it only takes that one weakest link to cause some kind of breach or some kind of cybersecurity incident. Perhaps someone leaking their credentials somewhere, or those credentials being found on the dark web through some other kind of security breach. So it only takes that one type of incident for you to your incident for your organization, and all of the things that you've put in place from a technical perspective, from a compliance perspective, all of those could be out of the window just because one person has made a perhaps quite an honest mistake, or perhaps you've got a malicious insider that has done something intentionally. But it only takes that one thing, and we've seen with recent cases around data breaches by employees, and some interesting court cases around whether it's the company that are at fault there and therefore need to be held to account, or is it the individual that's done that data breach, either intentionally or accidentally. And I think we'll see more and more of those court cases come over the next few years that will start to indicate whether insurance companies are going to start to insure against that kind of thing as well, or whether they're just completely uninsurable.
Well, yeah, and it comes back to the point around the kind of this notion that typical insurance policies are insuring against something physical. So you think about house insurance or buildings insurance or car insurance, or even freight insurance. So going across water. All of those things are usually quantifiable. When you start talking about, as you say, the data leakage aspect and the virtual nature or the digital nature of a lot of these things, where do you start in terms of being able to draw out what that risk and therefore what the financial settlement would need to be as a result of it? So I think you're right. There's going to be some really interesting questions, and there's still going to be some really interesting test cases, I should imagine, that come through the courts that will help to kind of refine or redefine some of the aspects, or clarify some of the aspects of what cyber insurance means. So fascinating subject. As I say to everybody back who's joining us today, if we're able to get Joseph back onto the show to give his professional insight to us as well, we certainly will. But in the meantime, we've actually coming towards the end of the show as it is. So I do appreciate your contributions, both Kerry and Steve, on this one. Before we do close the show, as normally, let's get a quick view of what's going on in the news. Kerry, what have we got?
Yes, so Info Security magazine reports that Norway's wealth fund suffered a data breach that resulted in criminals stealing $10 million. ZDNet features an article on supercomputers across Europe that have been hacked to mine cryptocurrency. Incidents have been reported in the UK, Germany, Switzerland, and suspected in Spain. It appears criminals used compromised logins from university professors to access their computers. And then finally, there's an interesting article in the FT looking at various types of contact and tracing technology that could become available to help fight the COVID-19 pandemic.
Interesting, thank you. Again, there's interesting different types of news articles again, but some of them also have pretty similar themes. So you look at today's news roundup, it reminds me a little bit of how cyber attacks can be caused by both very simple techniques and also the more complex ones. I mean, it's often that it's the more complex ones that get the focus, but as we've talked time and time again on this show, actually getting those basics right is fundamentally important, because it's not all the complicated stuff that's actually successful. Sometimes it's the simplest things that become successful, and especially since we're in these pretty uncertain times right now, and we're all becoming more and more reliant on the digital connectivity, getting those basics and those frameworks in place is actually more important than perhaps ever before. What's your thoughts on it, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, take that example with the supercomputers. If it hadn't had the word supercomputer in it, I doubt it would have made the headlines, because a professor,
right,
their credentials being leaked somewhere, and some kind of resource being accessed is probably an everyday occurrence. Let's face it. I remember last month there was a big thing about the fact that Netflix might have been hacked, and there was a big investigation into it. It turns out that it was just lots of university folk from America, from a certain university, had all their credentials done. They all had Netflix. They all happened to have Netflix accounts as well. So the fact they could tie them up to that specific university, Netflix could say, it's not our problem, it's the university problem. All of their credentials have been breached. So clearly academia is kind of a high target for this kind of thing. But we were talking about insurance. Imagine the cost of insuring something like that on a supercomputer. the cost of those things must be enormous. So the premium you're going to pay for insurance on a supercomputer is going to be really, really high, and yet something really, really simple like a professor with access gaining, losing their credentials could cause a data breach. Just goes to show that sometimes the simplest things could throw that kind of stuff out the window. But what I think is really interesting about that story is back in 2018, there was lots and lots of talk about cryptojacking. So this is rather than installing ransomware on your devices, the attackers were using malware and compromised websites to get cryptojacking software installed on normal people's computers to do that cryptocurrency mining to generate cryptocurrency for the criminals. And there was a big thing on it. It was going to be the next big thing. Kind of never really took off as a major thing, both because the cryptocurrency market took a bit of a dive, so it was less profitable, but also I think the attackers kind of figured out that there was a lot of work to get very little back from crypto mining. Oh, I can't even talk now. Crypto mining the currency from my Dell i3 with 2 GB of RAM sat in the corner. But clearly there's a shift in focus here, because if I can crypto mine on a supercomputer, imagine the amount of cryptocurrency I could generate from that. So it's another example of criminals shifting their focus to what is going to be the most profitable in the shortest amount of time for them. So I think as supercomputers start to become more of the norm and we start to see more of them, clearly they're going to be more prone to cyber attacks.
Well, also an interesting point there is, of course, as technology starts moving on, the type of attacks will also evolve with that as well. So as you say, some of the things that probably wouldn't have been considered even just a few years ago are now certainly within the realms of possibility, and supercomputers is one. But of course, one of the news articles today was around the kind of the concepts of the contact and tracing technology that we could be using to help combat COVID-19. I mean, this starts to underline the fact that, and we've talked about this on the show before as well, bringing in new technologies and new techniques and fusing those with existing things can create vulnerabilities in its own right. And so as we start to innovate and evolve as far as technology is concerned and actually respond to certainly what's going on in the world right now, it does underline the point that actually cybersecurity is fundamentally important to be weaved in to the fabric of those projects, all those digital type projects from the outset, to minimize the risk to those kind of rollouts. So all of those good intentions for technology and all the good applications you can use technology for now inherently introduces its own level of risk and vulnerability, and therefore cyber becomes even more important to be considered as part of those initiatives as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that whole focus on privacy by design and security by design, that's got to be at the forefront of a lot of these new developments, particularly around tracing apps and data that's holding people's health and location details. I mean, if you haven't got privacy and security by design in something like that, then you're on a loser right from the start, aren't you?
Yeah, and even this is just underlines the fact that data is important and it's got a value to it as well, and it's certainly got a value to cyber criminals. And as you say, health-related data is perhaps some of the most sensitive of all. So it'd be interesting to see what comes from that as well. So excellent. Well, that really is all we've got time for on today's show. So I'll say a very special thanks to today's guests, Steve and Kerry, for joining me to talk all things. Kerry.
Just say thank you for having us.
You're most welcome. In fact, I might even welcome you back tomorrow as well if you're lucky. So yeah, it was it was good to chat. It was actually, I think it was a good conversation. It raises the importance of kind of cyber security in lots of different contexts. And today, of course, we kind of mused around cyber insurance, but of course the news starts to underline again where cybersecurity plays a role in the overall digital fabric of society, actually. So appreciate your comments and contributions to that, both of you today. We'll also thank you both for your contributions more generally, as you do each and every day on 0 Days Live, and of course everybody from behind the scenes here at 0 Days Live for helping us out too. of course, to all of you for tuning in today. Hope you got something of value from it. Please do join us again tomorrow, but in the meantime, do have an excellent rest of the day, and be sure to tune in again where we will have another special guest tomorrow, hopefully. Until then, thank you very much and see you all soon. Goodbye.